Did you know an ancient paradise once existed in the far north? Yes, in the place where we thought nothing thrived but ice. Its name was Hyperborea. Not only did this paradise exist, but there is a good chance that its inhabitants were part of the ancient civilizations that birthed humans. What was Hyperborea like? Who are the Hyperborean people? More importantly, what happened to them? We'll find out together in this new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. What if the Arctic wasn't always a frozen wasteland? What if, hidden beneath the endless sheets of ice, once thrived a civilization so advanced that the Greeks described it as a paradise beyond the north wind? They called it Hyperborea. This was a land of eternal sunlight, a place where winters never came, and people lived free of sickness and war. To the Greeks, it wasn't fantasy. For centuries, scholars dismissed these tales as mere myth. Hyperborea was tagged as a poetic exaggeration from a culture obsessed with divine ideals. But here's the problem. Modern science has uncovered evidence that the Arctic wasn't always icy. Geological studies show that during the Holocene warm periods, the poles were temperate. That is, they were lush, green, and even habitable. So, let's dig into it. Was Hyperborea just an imagination, or a distorted memory of a lost age? If civilizations like Egypt and Sumer preserved fragments of Atlantis in their myths, could the Greeks have preserved Hyperborea in theirs? It would interest you to know this. The Hyperborea studies don't just suggest fertile lands. It also talks of beings unlike any others, people who were tall, radiant, and long-lived. What's more, they wielded technologies that could go as far as harnessing consciousness itself. A people who lived not by the grind of survival, but in harmony with celestial laws. But if they truly existed, what happened to them? To the Greeks, Hyperborea wasn't some far-off dream, it was a geographic reality. The name itself means beyond Boreas, the god of the north wind. This means it was a land north of Thrace, beyond the icy blasts of winter. But here's the twist. In Hyperborea, the sun never sets. This led ancient poets like Pindar to describe it as a paradise where night itself seemed banished. How could they imagine such a thing? Modern science gives us a clue. Above the Arctic Circle, there are months when the sun truly doesn't set. To Mediterranean cultures, this must have sounded like magic. But to the Greeks, it was proof that a real people lived there. People so blessed to have existed in what seemed like the very threshold between earth and heaven. But this threshold was inaccessible. Ancient philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Neither by sea nor land can you find the road to the Hyperboreans." At first glance, it does look poetic. But historians argue that his lines reflected a mystery, especially when historians learned that travelers could go north, but something always stopped them. Sometimes it was impassable mountains, other times it was a dangerous storm. Yet fragments of testimony claimed some had reached it. Diodorus Siculus spoke of a magnificent island the size of Sicily, located far in the north, rich with fertile fields and temples of incredible size. Pilgrims, he said, traveled there in honor of Apollo, whose worship was central to the Hyperboreans. Think about it. If this is a myth, why describe geography so precisely? Why insist on temples, rituals, and pilgrimages if it were just an allegory? The Greek historians seem to know that Hyperborea was real. The question was not whether it existed, but why it was hidden. What truly set Hyperborea apart wasn't just its geography. The people are worthy of discussion. Ancient texts describe the Hyperboreans as tall, radiant, and ageless. People who lived in perfect harmony with nature. They knew no war, no disease, or decay. Ancient Greek poet Pindar wrote that their lives were spent in songs, dances, and sacrifices to the gods. To modern ears, this sounds unreal. How could their lives be so happy and simple? But in reality, not only were they happy northerners, they represented a higher state of being. That is, humans before the fall who were untouched by corruption. If this is true, then Hyperborea isn't just a myth. Hyperborea is our forgotten beginning. Let's talk about the Hyperboreans for a minute. Who were these radiant people that historians and poets could not stop describing? Ancient Greek writers painted the Hyperboreans as no ordinary humans, starting with Herodotus, an ancient Greek historian. He described them as a radiant race who lived beyond the north wind, in a land where the sun never set. How about Pindar? He spoke of them as deathless, untouched by disease or old age. Unlike mortal men, their lives stretched for centuries. Their existence was filled with music, feasts, and sacred rituals that harmonized them with the spiritual. On the subject of looks, the Hyperboreans were said to be tall, fair, and luminous. Yes, they glowed with such vitality. But that's not all. They lived for as long as 1,000 years. Can you believe that? This begs the question: could the Hyperboreans have unlocked secrets of human lifespan that science is only now rediscovering? The mystery of the Hyperboreans does not end with their age. These people weren't just admired by men, they were also beloved by gods. Here is something to help you believe. Greek mythology says that Apollo, the god of light, music, and prophecy, visited Hyperborea every 19 years. Upon his visit, it was said that he rejuvenated, feasted, and communed with his chosen people. Unlike humans elsewhere, the Hyperboreans did not worship in fear. Instead, they interacted with the divine as equals. Hyperboreans usually sent sacred offerings to Delphi, carried by swans or maidens. This bridged their Arctic homeland with the religious heart of Greece. Seeing Apollo's devotion raises a striking question. Why would one of the chief Olympian gods prefer the company of this hidden northern race over the Greeks themselves? Is there more to the Hyperboreans than we know? Perhaps the answers we seek lie in comparison to other ancient traditions. The thing is, the Hyperboreans don't stand alone in ancient memory. Across Indo-European traditions, tidbits of their story appear again and again. Vedic texts speak of the Uttarakuru, a northern land of radiant beings. Norse sagas describe Asgard and the shining Aesir gods in the far north. Even Persian myths tell of Iriana Vaya, the original Aryan homeland in a frozen northern zone. What unites these myths is the image of a luminous race, tall, long-lived, and guardians of higher wisdom. What if they are all cultural pieces pointing back to Hyperborea? The odds are alarming. Every Greek schoolboy learned that Apollo, god of light, music, and prophecy, didn't stay in Delphi year-round. He left each winter and traveled north to Hyperborea, his true homeland. There, among the radiant people, Apollo was rejuvenated. Think about this. Even the god of light, whose temple at Delphi shaped Greek identity, drew his power not from Olympus, but from a civilization beyond the north wind. These were real rituals tied to geography, suggesting the Greeks knew there was a powerful cult far beyond their borders. But more than a mere ancient cult, Hyperborea had more. Diodorus Siculus wrote that in Hyperborea, there was a temple of Apollo larger than anything Greece had ever seen. Diodorus Siculus spoke about it in his work, Bibliotheca Historica. He described the temple as spherical, aligning with celestial movements. This echoed what we'd later find in Stonehenge and even the great solar temples of Egypt. How could separate cultures, thousands of miles apart, build temples that seem to follow the same design principles. One explanation: they shared a common teacher. Could Hyperborea have been that origin point? Back then, the Greeks feared the future, so they consulted oracles. But the oracles were believed to gain their sight from Hyperborean knowledge. Herodotus even claimed that the most famous oracle, the one at Dodona, was originally a Hyperborean import. And here's where things get interesting. The Delphic oracle, which shaped wars, politics, and colonization, was tied directly to Apollo's journeys north. When the god left for Hyperborea every winter, Delphi's sacred flame dimmed. And when he returned in spring, prophecy bloomed again. This cycle showed something deeper. Prophecy itself was sustained by Hyperborean contact. Without them, the gods grew silent, and perhaps without them, Greece would have gone blind about the future. This discovery makes us wonder, were the Hyperboreans just mythical northerners, or were they the hidden teachers behind the very religion of classical Greece? Not only is Hyperborea regarded as the special ingredient behind Greece's religion, but the civilization has also been discovered to house unimaginable technology. In ancient texts, Hyperborea wasn't just a frozen wasteland, it was a radiant realm powered by crystals. Their cities had towering quartz spires that pulsed with harmonic frequencies. Most of all, they channeled Earth's natural energy fields. These weren't simple decorations. The Hyperboreans mastered piezoelectric technology. We're talking about the tech that uses pressure within massive crystals to generate power. Imagine cities lit not by fire, but by vibrational resonance. Also, in this civilization, they achieved healing through sound and crystal harmonics, tuning the human body like a living instrument. There was nothing like the adverse reactions that come from using orthodox medicines. Even today, the Arctic remains wrapped in mystery. Satellite readings reveal magnetic irregularities. On a closer look, you'll find areas where compasses spin wildly and electromagnetic fields surge far beyond natural expectations. Some scientists chalk it up to shifting poles. But counter-researchers argue something else. What if remnants of Hyperborean technology were buried beneath the ice? How about the popular machines of the north that stabilized the climate and balanced Earth's magnetism? In today's world, we call these things anomalies. But what if these anomalies are the silent echoes from Hyperborea still resonating millennia after the fall? Explorers have reported strange auroras appearing with no solar activity, as though the sky itself was responding to something below. If Hyperborea truly tapped into Earth's magnetic grid, then the anomalies aren't just geological quirks, they're fingerprints of a forgotten energy network. And if that's true, then the frozen north may be less dead than we think. Perhaps the ice hides a sleeping system waiting to be rediscovered. What makes the Hyperborean puzzle even stranger is its uncanny resemblance to Atlantis. Both civilizations are said to have built cities aligned with energy lines, powered by crystals, and stabilized by Earth's magnetic field. In Plato's dialogues, Atlanteans used fire from the earth, channeled through crystalline structures. Ancient texts describe Hyperboreans doing the same, only with greater refinement. Some researchers suggest the two were not separate at all, but twin outposts of the same global civilization. The fall of Atlantis through flood and the freezing of Hyperborea through pole shifts may have been one great disaster recorded differently in myth. If so, then the crystal grids and other forgotten technology beneath the Arctic ice are chapters of the same lost story. A story where humanity once lived in resonance with the planet itself. In Hyperborea, words were almost unnecessary. Communication happened mind to mind. Can you believe that? A place where telepathy wasn't a superpower, but a daily language. Greek accounts describe the Hyperboreans as beings of purity and clarity, living without lies or deceit. How can lies thrive? When your very thoughts can be heard, deceit becomes impossible. But here's the striking part. Modern research into brainwave synchronization and quantum entanglement suggests such communication might not be fantasy. Studies show minds can align, and even emotions can be felt across distances. Could Hyperborea have mastered what science now calls psi phenomena? Imagine a world where every intention was transparent, where harmony wasn't enforced by law but by consciousness itself. What if their peace was not necessarily a cultural choice, but a mental thing? It does not end here. To the Hyperboreans, reality wasn't limited to flesh. Ancient traditions describe them as astral voyagers who are able to leave their bodies and explore the earth and beyond. They weren't bound by the laws of gravity or distance. Think of shamans who enter trances, Tibetan monks practicing dream yoga, or the Egyptian bar soul that traveled after death. Now imagine an entire civilization living with that ability, mapping the stars constantly. If their explorers traveled astrally, maybe that's why so many ancient maps show impossible accuracy. For example, Antarctica's coastline beneath the ice. Were those maps drawn by ships or by minds? This just shows us that what science dismisses as hallucination might have once been a tool of navigation. If the out-of-body experience surprised you, brace yourself for more. The most radical claim is not that Hyperboreans used telepathy to communicate. It's that the Hyperboreans could shape matter with thought. Some sources suggest they moved stones, generated energy, and even healed wounds through consciousness. Outrageous? Maybe. But experiments in psychokinesis, though controversial, show small but consistent effects. Now compare this with the impossible feats of ancient architecture. We see monoliths weighing hundreds of tons. All these were lifted without modern cranes. What about the stones fitted so tightly that no blade can pass between them? Were Hyperborean techniques the seed of this ancient knowledge? If thought could influence matter, Hyperborea didn't just master tools, they mastered reality itself. Their temples may not have been built with brute force, but with focused resonance. They aligned mind and matter in ways we can barely imagine today. But beyond that, their cities were a wonder. Hyperborean cities weren't random clusters of stone. They were a sight to behold. Ancient Greek writers say that Hyperboreans aligned their temples with the movements of the stars. Sounds like an exaggeration, right? But their cities functioned not only as homes, but also as astronomical calendars. When you weigh the odds, the description mirrors other sacred geometries across the world. For example, the pyramids of Giza align with Orion, and even Teotihuacan mirrors the layout of the Milky Way. Could these distant cultures all be inheriting a single Hyperborean blueprint? It gets more interesting. The architecture of Hyperborea was said to have glowed with an unearthly brilliance. Temples were carved from crystalline stone that conducted energy. Imagine entire cities designed like tuning forks to match Earth's magnetic field. And when you look at modern architecture, you see shadows of this in structures that defy explanation. We're talking Baalbek's massive foundation stones, Machu Picchu's earthquake-proof walls, or Göbekli Tepe's aligned pillars from 12,000 years ago. These sites all show similar geometry. But the marvels of Hyperborea transcend their physical architecture. Did you know that Hyperborea had sacred sites that acted as gateways between worlds? Yes. Temples were deliberately placed on geomagnetic hotspots, that is, points where Earth's magnetic energy is strongest. Modern science may call them anomalies, but the ancients treated them as portals. Across cultures, the same pattern emerges. For example, Delphi's oracle built above a fissure, or Mesoamerican pyramids at magnetic nodes, or even Tibetan monasteries on ley line crossings. Makes us wonder if these uncanny resemblances are footprints of Hyperborean knowledge passed down through generations. It might interest you to discover that the architectural principles aren't the only secrets handed down by the Hyperboreans. There is more to say regarding their spirituality. What was the spiritual society of Hyperborea like? Let's start from here. Greek historians described Hyperborea as a land of never-ending sunlight, where days flowed into each other without darkness. At first glance, this sounds impossible. But in the far north, during certain periods, the sun never sets. To ancient travelers, this must have felt like stepping into a divine realm. But the Hyperboreans didn't just live under the midnight sun. They revered it. Their festivals were said to last months. They did this to match the celestial cycles. Some scholars even suggest their entire calendar revolved around solar rhythms, blending astronomy with spirituality. Imagine living in a society where time itself wasn't dictated by clocks, but by the living cosmos. Could this explain why Hyperboreans were seen as closer to the gods? Perhaps they weren't worshippers of the sun, but partners in its energy, a crazy thought in itself. Even crazier is this thought. Was their connection to light the key to their long lifespans? In addition, the kind of peace experienced by the Hyperboreans is too surreal. Ancient texts insist the Hyperboreans lived in a world without disease, aging, or war. They were described as a people of peace, untouched by the violence that consumed other civilizations. But how could such a society exist? Perhaps their advanced technology eliminated scarcity, removing the root causes of conflict. Or perhaps their spiritual training suppressed ego-driven competition. In Greek accounts, the Hyperboreans not only avoid war, they actively radiated harmony, influencing surrounding nations. What was their source? Is this why Apollo, god of healing and prophecy, was said to spend his winters among them? A society without war sounds utopian. But what if it's only unthinkable because humanity forgot it was once possible? The most shocking declaration about the Hyperboreans is their extraordinary lifespan. Some accounts say they lived for hundreds of years, never aging as we do. Could this have been due to the environment alone? When you consider the clean air, crystal energy, and perfect diet, it seems like a good enough deal. Or was it their mastery of consciousness? Did it allow them to slow biological decay? Ancient mystics believed thought itself could extend life, and Hyperborea may have been the living proof. Texts describe them as free from old age and disease. Their deaths only came when they chose to die, and the departures were celebrated as conscious transitions, not tragedies. Instead of fear, they embraced death as a gateway to higher dimensions. What if aging, as we know it, isn't natural at all, but a symptom of lost knowledge? The Greeks didn't imagine Hyperborea as a distant myth. Instead, they believed their own culture was shaped by it. Every year they told of sacred offerings sent from Hyperborea to Delphi, the spiritual center of Greece. Like we stated before, Apollo himself was said to retreat to Hyperborea each winter. And since Apollo was an ancient Greek god, the nation had no choice but to acknowledge its solemn connection to Hyperborea. Imagine a beautiful paradise with empires suddenly crumbling underneath ice. This is how Hyperborea ended. It is established that Hyperborea is a land of eternal spring. Nevertheless, geological evidence indicates rapid pole shifts that could have transformed warm climates into frozen wastelands almost overnight. Scientists now admit the poles have shifted before, altering weather and habitability on a global scale. This brings us to ask, what if Hyperborea's fall wasn't gradual, but catastrophic? A swift flash freeze that buried cities under ice within days? Most likely. The mammoths of Siberia suggest exactly such an event. This is because they were discovered with undigested food in their stomachs. Could Hyperborea's people have faced the same fate? If so, their civilization didn't simply decline, it was erased in an instant. To the outside world, the exact cause of Hyperborea's disappearance is not known, but historians think otherwise. Aside from a sudden ice cataclysm, there are other possible factors. Across the ancient world, we know of a deluge. Some myths say it came in the form of great earthquakes and fire raining from the heavens. Plato even tied Atlantis' fall to violent floods. Could Hyperborea have met a similar end? In other books, some researchers connect Hyperborea's destruction to comet impacts or solar flares that destabilized Earth's climate. Ancient traditions align too. From the Norse Ragnarok, where fire and ice consume the world, to Native American tales of sky stones that caused flooding. Since Hyperborea sat at Earth's magnetic crown, any cosmic event striking the poles would have devastated it first. Perhaps their mastery of Earth's energies couldn't shield them from the heavens. Was this punishment by the gods, or just the cruel result of heavenly cycles? But here's the twist. The legends don't say Hyperborea vanished entirely. They say its people migrated south. Legends from Greece to India describe luminous northern teachers, bringing agriculture, astronomy, and spiritual lore. Archaeology reveals sudden bursts of advanced knowledge appearing across Eurasia, and they are all too sudden to be a coincidence. So, did Hyperborea truly die? Or did it disperse to camouflage itself in the rise of later empires? Share your theories or questions in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, leave us a like and subscribe to our channel for more. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again.